This is the Matt Report Podcast, a podcast for WordPress professionals, agencies, freelancers, consultants, users, community members. If you're interested in learning about the business side of WordPress, this is the place to be. If you're interested to have discussions, deep-rooted conversations about the community, where WordPress is going, and the business behind it all, it's mattreport.com. mattreport.com/subscribe is the number one way to stay connected. You're listening to Season 5. This episode of the Matt Report is brought to you by Gravity Forms. Gravity Forms was the first commercial plugin I ever purchased for my agency, and I've been a loyal customer ever since. When I see the annual renewal charge come through for Gravity Forms, I don't cringe or second guess keeping it in our toolkit. I'm a proud customer. Gravity Forms is not only a great example of a successful WordPress product, but a product that helps me become successful at what I do. See, it's more than just forms. It's a survey tool. It's an online payment transaction. It's the cornerstone to automated marketing through their Zapier add-on, and the list goes on. If you're looking for a contact form that's more than a contact form, check out Gravity Forms at gravityforms.com. That's gravityforms.com. So you want to take your WordPress plugin and turn it into SaaS. Seems fairly easy. Throw it on a multi-site, add some Gravity Forms registration, and a bit of a payment gateway, and you should be off to the races. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. Luckily, Darren Ethier and Garth Koyle, both from EventSmart and Espresso. Now, I guess I should say that Espresso, well known as an event calendaring system plugin for WordPress, of course, but they have a SaaS-based component. It's called EventSmart. These two gentlemen join Kory and Sam today to talk about this whole thing of running a SaaS-based business on top of WordPress, the ins and outs, shifting from plugin to SaaS, and what the technical components look like. This will be a pretty technical show, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. If you're not super technical, you're going to learn something and maybe even spark a thing or two in terms of how you might even think about hiring a professional to do the work for you if you have these grand ideas of spinning up your own SaaS startup. I tell you, this has been a fun season so far. If you've been enjoying it, it's mattreport.com/subscribe. Leave a 5-star review in iTunes. Let's go. This episode of the Matt Report is brought to you by Pagely. Pagely, where we help big brands scale WordPress. It's enterprise WordPress hosting in the Amazon cloud. If you're building big, powerful WordPress websites for your clients, you need big, powerful hosting, and Pagely delivers. I use Pagely for my websites and e-commerce shops, so I trust their service, and I have no issues recommending them to you. Look, I only bring on sponsors that I trust. And who else trusts Pagely? Verizon, eBay, Disney, Twitter, and more. You can see that right on the homepage of their website. Pagely is the OG of WordPress managed hosting, and they're innovating the market every single day. If your clients trust you to write scalable code, then trust Pagely to host it for you. Check out pagely.com.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Kory, and I'm here with Sam. And today we are talking with Darren Ethier and Garth Koyle from Espresso and EventSmart, and we're going to be talking about some of the technical issues that you face when running a SaaS in the context of WordPress. How are you doing today, guys? Yeah, pleasure. I actually was excited to learn about. I've known about Espresso for a while, but it was only when talking with Darren that found out that you guys are running EventSmart using some of the same technology, which is very cool and very relevant to some of the tech decisions that I think both Sam and I have been looking into. So if you would, why don't one of you give us the sort of 2-minute rundown of what Espresso and EventSmart are?
Okay, so we can start off with Espresso. So Espresso is our WordPress plugin that specializes in online event registration and ticketing. So you're talking about registration forms, ticket capacity, printable tickets, scanning tickets, contacting attendees, emailing attendees, things of that nature. It's all about that event management within a WordPress context. So that's Event Espresso, and we've launched a little over 2 years ago. We launched a SaaS product we called Event Smart, eventsmart.com. So Event Smart is essentially the same Event Espresso technology, running in a WordPress multi-site platform, powering events on a single, platform with an infrastructure as compared to individual self-hosted websites. So Event Espresso is for those who are using WordPress, have a WordPress website, want to maintain and work on that, whereas Event Smart is essentially, sign on, create an account, create your events, publish, sell tickets, get paid directly. It's really, just more economical time-wise and less technical for those who don't want to handle a website. So that's what we do with Event Smart.
Nice. And since we are the utmost professionals around here, I should have asked this first. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us what your roles are there?
So I'm one of the co-founders of Event Espresso and Event Smart. I focus mostly on. I'm more of a non-technical co-founder in the sense that I focus mostly on processes, planning, marketing, and sales. Kind of the human resources, finance side of things. That's where I spend most of my time.
Hey, I'm Darren, and I've been doing web development for going on about 18 years now, full-time the last 5 or 6 years. I started with WordPress way back in WordPress 1.5, Billy Strayhorn, I think was it called. So I've been around the WordPress world for a while, seen a lot of changes. I've been working on the Event Espresso team for about 5 years. So pretty much corresponds with me going full time. Very fortunate to jump on board the team. And my current role at Event Espresso is, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. I was thinking about this the other day, kind of like the cat in the hat. Like I'm good at creating problems, but hopefully I'm also good at solving some of those problems as well. So that's kind of my role.
Not many people can describe themselves as the cat in the hat of the team. What would it be? Let's see. So you've got CEO, CTO. So cat in the hat. CITHO.
Uh-oh.
Cool. All right. Well, let's dive in a little bit. So let's start with talking about the plugin. You're currently on version 4, and it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, version 4 is a complete rewrite, and it might not even be backwards compatible with version 3. So first, is that correct? Is that little summary correct?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, version 4 we launched, that's going on 3-4 years now ago, Garth. Yeah, so it's not backwards compatible. In other words, somebody can't just, run all their EE3 events with the version 4. However, with the latest version of EE3 at the time of launch, we did build a migration. So people were able to migrate their EE3 events into the new version. So in that sense, we didn't leave our users hanging for the most part.
Gotcha. And so you said that was 3 or 4 years ago that you launched EE4?
Yeah.
But you still have EE3 on the website. So
yeah.
Let's first, is there like a sunset date, or are you like supporting that indefinitely? And how did you make that decision?
Well, a large part of the decision was based on as part of launching the new core plugin. Obviously, we wanted to ship it out as soon as we could and as soon as we thought it was stable. But we have a large stable of add-ons for EE3 users that weren't fully compatible with EE4 yet, and we hadn't built replacements for them. So over the last 3-4 years, we've been, catching up with the add-ons and the functionality that our EE3 users were used to. And we really didn't want to retire EE3 until we felt EE4 was just a drop-in replacement for the majority of our users. We're getting fairly close to that. Although EE3 is still available, we consider a legacy product. We only do bug fixes on it now. We've communicated that clearly with our users. And that, by bug fixes, I mean like security issues and that kind of thing.
Right.
So it is on its way to a sunset. We haven't set a hard date. Just because we want to be really comfortable when we do set that hard date that the remaining users we still have on E3 will be able to transition painlessly. And we're pretty close to that, Garth, I think. Is there anything you want to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I think in the next year or two, we're going to be able to set more of an expectation of when we're going to end support for that. But it's not anytime soon, just because we find that, it's still needed. We still have thousands of customers on the Event Espresso 3. So we're going to still support it for some time. But really, it came down to feature parity, to not boot it out the door immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of developers deal with the problem of legacy code and whether they should just build on to their existing plugin and try and refactor, or should they just release an entirely new plugin with a new code base that kind of drops a lot of the legacy problems. So how did you guys approach that, and what was the deciding factor in saying, okay, we just got to rewrite this. It's going to take a long time to, make our old add-ons compatible with the new code base, but it's worth it at this point.
Well, I think, from a developer standpoint, I came on the team just shortly after development of EE4 had started. And at the time, it was actually called EE 3.2. So it was initially going to be something that was just going to be a few fixes in the EE3 code base. And at that time, our lead developer had just started working through that. And it's just gradually recognizing that a lot of the feature sets that were being requested and some of the plans that the founders had for the future in terms of doing a SaaS platform and that kind of thing, just in evaluating the technical debt that was there in EE3 and recognizing that, hey, if we want to build some of this stuff, we're going to need to move forward with a new code base that's a little bit structured better. I mean, EE3 is primarily procedurally based code. And so we really built EE4 with more modern technologies and approaches in doing object-oriented design and that kind of thing. And even EE4 on its own has gone through a number of mini refactors through years as well, which always happens, right?
Right.
That's primarily the decision that kind of led into that factor. Is it was really prompted by a large part by our users wanting improvements to the existing EE3 add-ons and that, and new features that have been in the pipes for a while, and realizing that, hey, if we're going to do this, we need to improve the framework which we're building this stuff. And it's worked really well because we're able to more rapidly iterate, even though from a user standpoint, it's still fairly slow. From a developer standpoint, it's like, going night and day between, it was always kind of a contest who would be tackling an issue in E3. No, you do it. It worked really, and I got to say this, though, it's amazing because EE3, even though, from a developer standpoint, looking at it and saying, oh, this is ugly code, there's always going to be ugly code. And the fact is, it still did incredibly well in serving meeting customers' needs for the life that it had. So, kudos to those who worked on it initially and getting it out the door.
That reminds me of the quote that they show on post status: code is poetry. Probably not your code, but somebody's code is poetry.
Yeah.
I love it.
Pretty much so, yeah.
So let's transition a little bit here to the topic of the day, which is SaaS. Was part of the, again, technical decision to upgrade or to revamp the code all the way down to the studs, so to speak. Also, in thinking about the future and kind of future-proofing for a switch to SaaS, or being able to reuse some of that code in a SaaS context?
Yeah, there are several factors that went into rewriting Event Espresso 3 to Event Espresso 4, but the SaaS platform had always been in our view for a couple of years. And so that was one of the major factors. Is this something that we want to build on into the future with a SaaS platform? And the developers who were coming on board as part of the team really didn't want to use Event Espresso 3, nor was it built in such a way that it was going to be scalable. So in some ways, our hand was forced to say, if we want to do something different and great with this, then it needs to be a little more different and it needs to be better. So the SaaS product was always in view of influencing that decision.
Makes sense. And when did you expand into SaaS or start that process?
We launched it publicly in January of, I think our goal was December 31st of 2014, and I think we technically hit that date. I think we lifted the curtain on the 31st. So it's been operating publicly since essentially January 1st, 2015.
Nice.
And it took us, it took us probably 6 months to set up to get to that point, to set up some infrastructure, some initial features and management, and the purchase process, the user management. But then when you take into account that we had to rewrite our plugin, it took us almost 3 years to get to the point of launching a SaaS service that we were comfortable with it working, meeting a certain customer's needs, and getting it started. It's not perfect by any means, but we definitely believe in the philosophy to ship it often rather than hold it back until we're guessing when it's perfect.
Sure. And do you, thinking back, obviously there's the beginning of the thinking, and then there's the actual planning and all that before launch. Do you have any recollection of kind of what was the inspiration? I mean, was it other people doing something similar? Was it just simply, SaaS is what everybody's talking about? What was kind of the thinking that went into it?
Before I ever officially joined with my co-founder Seth, he was building this our legacy product, and he even called it something else. It was like advanced event registration with PayPal IPN or something like that. Very titled very much like a developer would, as almost a README file. But I told him, I said, from a marketability standpoint, you've got to provide ways for customers to be able to, as quickly and as fast as possible, sell their tickets. And that included being able to get their ticket sales process off of their website. It could be WordPress. This was back in 2009 or something, and so I don't know what version of WordPress that was, and I don't know what percent of the web was powered by WordPress at the time, but I think it was sub 20%. It might have been around 15. So you've got a lot of it. Really, it started off with an impetus of facilitating success for our customers, making sure that they could use whatever technology to post their tickets and sell them without any inhibitions with the technology they're using. So
were people asking for it? I mean,
no, they weren't. They weren't asking for it. It was because the only people that you had using it at the beginning, at that time, back in 2008, 2009, were only those who were using WordPress. So they were pretty happy with it. But I was telling Seth, I said, in order to make this really something bigger and significant, you've got to get away from that percentage that is only using WordPress.
And I think eventually when I came on board, this had been something that had been in the back of Garth and Seth's mind for a while. They knew they eventually wanted to move towards a SaaS platform. I think, Garth, you made that clear. Even when we started development on E4, think we're going to be using this eventually, guys, for multi-site. So let's make sure you're developing in ways that'll work well with that. But one of the things we started seeing coming in from our users of Event Espresso was people who had no clue what WordPress was.
Sure.
Right? They just discovered that they needed a solution for event management. They came across our plugin to a Google search, whatever, found out about, it runs on WordPress. In fact, we had one support customer come in. One of the support queries was, where's the exec file? Where do I double click the exe file, to install this on Windows? And okay, right. But, you have this reality of users who have no idea of really what WordPress is, and that this was a plugin for WordPress and I need to install it. And so you recognize, hey, there's a need for this, right? There's a need to remove this whole hosting equation, setting up plugins, all that out of the equation. Like Garth said, opening it up to a wider subset of people who don't know anything about WordPress, just need a solution for their events.
Yeah, we eventually, I mean, we do have people all the time say, hey, will you build this for Joomla? Will you build this for Drupal? They have some solutions out there, but that's just, very different than, that would be a whole different business unit to try to build for a different platform. Let alone, is it advantageous for us? I don't know. We just haven't gone there. So we, as the user base grew, we started to get more requests for people to make it platform specific, but instead we said, well, let's make it more platform agnostic, so that now people can use the SaaS platform on those other technologies as well. Instead of going more platform specific, we broadened it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And it's interesting to think about it that way. We as WordPress insiders, WordPress developers, often think about what can I do with my WordPress website, as opposed to arguably the vast majority of WordPress users don't think about everything in the context of WordPress, especially when it comes down to business needs or just something that they want to get done. So very good on you guys for recognizing that and saying let's go broader with this.
Yeah, I think a lot of, just to kind of summarize that too, I think a lot of us will have a tendency to think that our problem has to be solved in a very specific way, when it usually doesn't. You can use what doesn't seem to be a perfect solution for quite a long period of time and realize, hey, this is great. Otherwise, we'd have to throw a whole lot of money and effort into making it the perfect solution, but this other solution is working fine right now. And that's also supported by the rise of SaaS platforms, and that it's not everything everybody always needs, but it's going to serve a lot of people, 80% of the time, to better than it would if they had to build it themselves or had to have a more expensive, even more niche product.
For sure.
Right. So you decided that you're building this platform so that people don't have to worry about, managing their own WordPress site anymore. And that allows you to kind of create a more customized admin experience for them. So how much work was it to build that admin experience compared to what you thought it was going to be? So in other words, how much extra effort did you have to expend beyond just building the new plugin in order to create this SaaS platform around the plugin?
So Darren, can I answer that one too? Because this is one that I find interesting. So this goes to exactly the comment that I made just a minute ago, in that people often think that they need to have something different because they're somehow different. And your question shows the fact that you feel like we had to do that, but we didn't have to, and we didn't. So you look at the interface for EventSmart, it's the same as Event Espresso. Mm-hmm. Okay? And we even had a competitor who signed up for our website and said, not even knowing that it was our system, they signed up for EventSmart and said, oh, we were just signing up to see what it was like. We didn't even know it was you guys. But they signed up and essentially they see the WordPress interface, which if apparently you find that not satisfactory because apparently you felt like it needed to be customized. And thus other people think that as well. But we've been successful so far not having to customize it. And the other advantage to doing that so far is that instead of building an interface that we assume somebody in a SaaS model is going to need or want, we can now do user testing and iterate upon that instead of guessing. We can understand what they need, what feedback they need. So granted, we have people sign up and say, oh, this is like WordPress, I don't want to use WordPress. And so they don't. But we have thousands of people who have signed up and it hasn't been a problem. So first we have to challenge the assumption that you had and others have had, that because we're focusing on a SaaS market, that it has to be so different. It doesn't have to be. That's an assumption. And we've proven it to ourselves that it hasn't had to be. Not to mean that a custom UI won't be better, because we think it will, and we're making improvements that way. Darren's actually working on some of that as well. So we've learned, well, again, it gets back to the theory of that we're going to ship often and ship early rather than hold it back and guess at what people need. So we went with the standard interface to get it out to the door, begin growing our user base, begin collecting, learnings on what works for people and what doesn't, and then we iterate from there.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable lesson, and it's good to hear that people are still able to use WordPress even if it is in the SaaS context.
Well, obviously, I could just add a couple of things. Obviously, there's there are times where you want to make sure that the user interface you have is friendly to people. WordPress has proven itself pretty much with the admin interface. I mean, obviously, there's some movements to improving that. Right now, one of the focuses this year is on improving the editor and stuff like that. But like Garth said, what we had works. We don't want to guess at what users want. We're just going to iterate on that and get something out there. And so fortunately, because we designed the plugin we didn't really have to do any changes to the core plugin, critical changes, in order to have it work on SaaS. We would just put it up there and focus on the SaaS aspect of things itself rather than making our plugin fit, right? Which is important.
So then, where have users? You said you're starting to work on a new user interface, or at least components to help users along. Where have users had the most trouble with the standard WordPress the standard WordPress interface, where you feel like you have to fill in the gaps?
Sam just can't believe that the WordPress admin is okay.
Well, yeah. So, like I said, I understand your opinion that, like, how could you be using the WordPress interface? But this is we're shipping early, we're shipping often, we're iterating upon that as opposed to guessing. But I will say that there are definitely some improvements that need to be made. So the real challenge that we found when using the WordPress interface usually has to do with configuring options, because when you look at the WordPress menu, there are a lot of menu items. Like, where do I change this? Where do I change that? Where do I change this? And we have people using our platform from everything from like health screenings to fairs and conferences. And so the user's expectation is very different when they come to it, right? Their perception is put upon the interface, and how do I plan for that? So usually when they're actually creating their events, we've done a really good job at making that pretty clear. And they seem to be okay there. It's usually comes into, I'm getting an error message of this type when I'm trying to submit a payment. So, now we have to go and help them make sure that their API credentials were correct. Or I want the front end to look a little bit different, right? They're wanting buttons to look different or be in a different position and that type of thing. So it's usually these concerns that have to do with setup and configuration. So
Gotcha.
Our plan is what we've discussed is to essentially bring some sort of a wizard or something to the beginning and say, what type of events are you configuring? And then we'll step you through a couple of processes to make sure that it's set up for your perception.
Nice.
Kind of meet your needs.
For your context. So that, if you have somebody who's going to be doing a conference event, for example, based on what we've learned from people using Event Espresso for conferences, we're able to present them with a series of steps that will fit them in making their, setting up their event for a conference. Because right now the interface is the same no matter what event you're running, right? So, people have to kind of figure out, okay, well, how am I going to make this fit what I'm doing for my event? Whereas if we're able to take away some of that initial frustration in figuring that out and saying, okay, I want a conference with breakout sessions and some speakers, and some sponsors, we're able to present an interface that's more tailored to what the person who is creating the event for. And that has a lot of great potential there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that makes total sense. I mean, you're following one of the cardinal rules of lean startups and SaaS best practices and all that, of doing what your customers tell you rather than making it up, which is great. So what have been some of the challenges in reusing the tech, but then also growing this platform?
So basically, some of the big challenges we had is that designing for a single site WordPress distributed product is radically different from something that you're hosting yourself, where you're going to potentially have thousands, tens of thousands sites, right? And so obviously the first challenge is making sure that whatever you're using as your key plugin or your key product in a WordPress environment is something that's going to scale well in a multi-site environment. And one of the things we discovered that was kind of a big surprise to us was something that I just never would have thought of. I knew WP Cron, the scheduling service API that WordPress provides is a great little tool to use without even thinking. Sometime you schedule something to fire off once a day or something, and it'll take care of running that task for you. It's a great tool. However, in multi-site, it really does not scale well. And we used WP Cron intentionally in a number of different areas for managing in behind the scenes processes that would happen for Event Espresso, including our messages system, which would send out the registration confirmation emails and all that. And actually, we did a rewrite of our messaging system to use this because we thought it would be less resource intensive for our users. But when we launched it on multi-site, everything slowed down to a crawl, and it was incredible. We were going, oh no, what happened? And it turned out because every site is spawning WP cron jobs, and then our hosts at the time, they have a special process that will find the sites that have a schedule to run, and then ping that site so it runs it a little bit more efficiently. But basically, we discovered right away that WP cron wouldn't work. So one of the biggest challenges has been finding a solution for scaling. And in that case, we realized that, okay, we have to design certain parts of our plugin so that it may use something like WP Cron or an API within WordPress that works really well in single site. People can get away with it great, but can be swapped out for more like multi-site or sites that are more intensive in the number of hits and traffic they get and stuff. So we did that with the messages system. I'm just giving you a practical example where we can swap it out with something called Gearman, and we use actually a WP Gears plugin by 10up, which will have a long-running set of workers that are running in the server. And you just assign jobs, and the workers will pick up a job. So it's kind of going towards a microservice architecture for some of the stuff that runs. And eventually, we can even put that on its own server, so there's no interruption for site users. So it's little things like that. If you're a developer primarily working in this, a WordPress world with single sites and stuff, and you're thinking about doing a SaaS platform on WordPress using WordPress. You might not be aware of those kind of things initially, right? And that's part of the learning process for us. So that was one big one that hit us. Another one is making sure you're cache friendly. I mean, that goes without saying. Even with single sites, you want to be cache friendly. We found on multi-site that one of the things we were doing and the environment we were in is that we were loading certain things for Event Espresso where we shouldn't be loading it. Every plugin developer does that sometimes, right?
Never.
Yeah, never. And so it's just one of those simple things. We realized that, hey, for example, sometimes with e-commerce, we think, let's use the PHP session. We'll just set up PHP session, and now we remember all the user details, and we can have the cart attached to that and everything. Well, it doesn't really work well with caching, especially when you start to scale, right? You have to start thinking about, okay, if you're going to have multiple web servers, how are you going to handle the session between those web servers? How are you going to handle caching on pages which really don't need the PHP session? So we had to work around things like that. Things like using query strings in your URL. Sometimes you think it's just a quick hack to throw something in a query string, listen for that query string, and do something with it. Well, that doesn't cache well. So, those are all little things that, an experienced developer will really pick up. But sometimes if you're, only used to working with single site and just doing a plugin on the side or something like that, you won't know until you start diving into the big world of SaaS and multi-site and all that stuff. So little things like that. Another thing is sometimes you don't think of is using WP Mail as your mail server, right? It tends to be very reliable if the mail setup on the server is really reliable. And if you're in control of your own hosting environment, you can do that. But again, as you start going to multi-site, we found that, you want to make sure that people's mail is getting delivered. So you want to make sure that, things like your DKIM and SPF is all set up properly. We found using a transactional email service, offloading that is a huge help. And so we built that into our SaaS platform and offer that for our users. But then, of course, the challenge is, okay, what do you deal with people? How about people who, find loopholes in your product and they use that to send a bunch of spam messages, right?
Sure.
And we had that happen. We had that happen where Mandrill, our transactional email provider, they actually shut us down because somebody discovered a loophole in one of the subsites. And all of a sudden, we discovered that none of their emails were going out. And we had to find that loophole and close it pretty fast.
Yeah, that actually brings up another question, which is when you're hosting this SaaS multi-site, is there, that's one issue that wouldn't arise if someone's just using a plugin version. Are there some other hosting-centric issues, someone abusing your transactional email or someone abusing your storage capacity or, trying to hack into other parts of the multi-site?
Yeah, one of the things that we decided when we started thinking about SaaS was, it kind of seems stupid now, but in hindsight, it was a good decision. We decided to host this thing ourselves and build it on using DigitalOcean. We threw up some servers. I had a couple of database servers, one web server, anyways, load balancer, in front of things. And it was stupid because none of us on the team were really strong system admin guys. We were kind of learning on the fly. Primarily me, cat in the hat guy, all right? Learning on the fly. But it was a good decision in the sense that we wanted to get out right away. We learned so much by doing it that when it came time to making the decision, we're spending more time in the server end of things than actually developing the product. We were equipped with the understanding and knowledge and the things we had learned to evaluate a partner who would partner with us for hosting. And we eventually, I think it was a year and a half ago, we partnered with Pagely, and Pagely actually does all our hosting for us. But yeah, when you're doing it yourself, there's so many things you have to think of in terms of what you're leaving yourself open to, especially if you're running something like, DigitalOcean or Linode or something like that, where you're running your own boxes, or even Amazon. Right. You're responsible for all the security, your permissions on your files, your users, who you have give access to the files, who deploys, are they, keeping their passwords up to date, that kind of thing, using secure passwords, not 1, 2, 3, all that thing, SSH, all that stuff, so it depends on, who the team is when you're thinking about starting SaaS. I guess I would say, if you've got the willingness to learn and you're able to learn, go for it. Do the hosting yourself initially. Get started on it. Test your idea. You'll learn a bunch, right? And it will help you make a wise decision when you do go to find a partner, because you'll know the questions to ask, or you'll understand what they're saying to you.
Right.
And you'll have a bit of an idea of what it is you're looking for. And the best part now is, I really truly feel that Pagely are our partners. When we have an issue, they'll jump in and say, oh, it looks like this. And I'm able to, kind of log in the terminal and say, oh, yeah, I can see that. Even though sometimes I don't entirely know what they're saying, I could kind of fudge my way based on the experience I've had with hosting, right? And that certainly helps when you're encountering issues and you need to deal with them and get them done fast and communicate the language that the host is communicating.
Yeah, some other quick examples is we had... after we went from hosting it ourselves to trying to find another host, we went to a pretty expensive host. And one of the technical problems we had was their firewall, so their WAF. They were basically throwing us on the same application firewall as a bunch of other users, and we found that our application was not working correctly because of their firewall. And so they said, okay, well, if you'll need a custom firewall application. Okay, well, that's $3,000 a month, right? So we're like, wait a minute, that's not going to work. This thing isn't even making any money yet. And so we're like, this just doesn't feel like the right approach. So that's when we started saying, well, this is partly an application this is a problem with WordPress. These people don't actually understand WordPress as much. And we come to find out that expensive host that we were working with was actually the infrastructure for Pagely at one time, who Pagely was then moving away from onto Amazon. So we kind of followed the trail of breadcrumbs and said, so it looks like Pagely probably has some more experience here with SaaS platforms or high volume WordPress websites, and then manage them with Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, they've been coming up a lot as a SaaS hosting partner. So it seems like if you're thinking about moving an existing plugin to SaaS or starting a WordPress-based SaaS, they're a good option.
Yeah, they're a good option.
And we're pushing the envelope in a lot of things with them right now. So you can thank us for breaking their stuff.
Nice.
So basically we call up and we say, we want the Event Espresso package. And they hang up quickly. So what's been really interesting about this conversation is we started the conversation talking about how you started with a plugin. You moved the plugin over to SaaS, and immediately it sounds like had to start accommodating for a number of scenarios and things that went obviously much deeper than a WordPress plugin, and a lot of hard lessons learned, it sounds like, as one might expect. Are there any good examples of tech that you've had to figure out for the SaaS that then you've been able to roll back into the plugin so that even those folks hosting their own can benefit?
Oh yeah, sure. One of the things is, like I said, when we had to do the whole deal with the WP cron issue, one area that's affected our core plugin development is we've been very careful about what we add for scheduling, because we know that there's a number of bigger users of the core plugin outside the SaaS platform. They're likely going to encounter some of the similar things we encountered, and part of that is we've started to think in terms of modularity. In other words, building things so that different APIs, different things we're using can be swapped out. So if there's somebody really wanting to customize Event Espresso systems for their own needs in their own environment, that they're able to do that, like swapping out, sending messages to WP Mail, instead use something totally different. Swapping out some of the processing of things in the background using WP cron scheduling and callback into something totally different. So we've tried to think through some of that in the different mini factors that we've done. And also, there's just been little things that have popped up in the events. One of the really cool things about SaaS, and this has probably come up before as well, is it's an incredible learning platform for your product. I mean, when you get feedback from support forums from your distributed product, often it's from the frustration of people, trying to use it, not doing what they want. And you spend a lot of your time just trying to recreate that environment, right? to find out what exactly it is they're doing that causes it to break.
Sure.
And sometimes finding out it's user error. Whereas in Event Smart, when we have users expressing frustration with something, we're able to go right on that site, see exactly what it is, reproduce what they're doing, get immediate feedback based on what they're experiencing. And we're able to take that and apply that to a core product based on what we learned, right? So there's been a lot of little small improvements that have impacted, including things such as in the Event Smart environment, somebody can't just install a plugin to do what they want. And so obviously there's some, user improvements that are done there by us to make it easier for people to do things they want. Like even just, changing the order of how things display on the list of events, where they may have the description located a certain way, and then something just different layout structure. Well, we've been able to take that. We knew we had to design it for Event Smart, so it'd be easier for people to change layouts, and we roll that into a core product, of course, because everything just goes into core product. And so now our distributed users have an easier way to affect the layout rather than using filters or stuff like that. So it's a bunch of little improvements like that that have helped, I think, with Event Smart. And the learning feedback loop is the biggest thing.
Interesting.
There's another example of that is actually the reverse direction, and that's you can use WordPress and activate a plugin to turn on a certain feature, but in a SaaS environment, if you don't allow plugins to be installed and activated, then you need to have that feature pre-installed and pre-activated, network activated. But at the same time, you got to have a toggle in order to activate or deactivate that feature, which on a WordPress website, you just deactivate the plugin or activate the plugin.
Right.
Yeah, that speaks to one of the technical challenges we had. Like we have our whole stable of add-ons for Event Espresso, and we're continually adding to that. And so even before we had the SaaS platform, one of the things that we intentionally designed into our core plugin was an easy way, not only for ourselves, but other developers to create add-ons that basically register themselves and have a set of, configuration options in that. And so everything goes into what we call our plugin API. And the benefit to that is now we can network activate all these add-ons on our platform, but programmatically deactivate them by just deregistering this one call. So we're able to, because our Event Smart platform is very feature-based. In other words, that's how you get we get the income as people want a feature and they upgrade. We're able to just control that through capabilities. So they purchase, we have a capability for a user on a site, and we have a set role for that. And it really works well. We don't have to worry about, and it's important because, remember, I don't think I mentioned this. Another challenge we have is the custom tables. The Event Espresso adds, I think, somewhere north of 10 custom tables, which is needed. A lot of people would say, "You're adding that many custom tables? Come on." Well, you obviously haven't done many e-commerce apps. I mean, you have to make sure you're doing your queries in a performant way. And sometimes the most performant way is to have really well-designed tables. Well-designed being the keyword.
Sure.
But anyways, so one of the challenges is obviously, as you start scaling and you get thousands of these sites, it's all in one database. And if you have to change something in a table, which hopefully you don't want to do too often, you have to have a way of managing that, right? So we actually have a really powerful migration tool. But the reason why I mention that is because with the add-on API, the add-ons actually register if they have a custom table or if there's any migration steps they need to do, they register that with the core plugin. So the core plugin takes care of all that. And then because it's feature-based, we don't turn off the actual add-on feature capability until after that registration routine. So if there's still migrations that need to happen or whatever, it happens in the background on that user's database, which is important because you don't want the user to be experiencing any downtime when they activate a feature or when they deactivate a feature or when they lose access to that feature. You don't want any data loss to happen. It's all still there. All we're controlling really easily programmatically is the access. So those are the kind of things you have to think of, especially if you're a plugin that you're going to use in a SaaS platform, has add-ons, or you think down the road you're going to add extra functionality. It's always good to have a way for that add-on to register itself with your core plugin and control it more easily that way.
Yeah. So we're actually closing in on an hour, but I want to ask one more question before we turn you guys loose, if that's all right. You guys have given a great description of the technical difficulties and technical problems that need to be addressed in running a multi-site based SaaS. But you also just brought up your plugin or your add-on model, and I want to ask you about pricing real quick before we go. So in both the plugin and the SaaS versions, you have a free tier, and then you have, for the SaaS, you have a couple of paid tiers plus individual add-on modules. So my question is, how do you decide what is free, and how do you decide what functionality the tiers have compared to what functionality is just an additional add-on?
So the short answer to your question is essentially based upon the customer persona or the type of customer that's going to be using that type of a feature. So, like with EventSmart, we have a bundled personal plan, which is essentially most of the features that a small event organizer is going to need for the most part. And then we have the business plan, which is essentially all of our features, excluding some gateway integrations, because they're going to need most of those features. Ticket scanning, mobile apps, tracking attendance, customizing emails for each event, essentially. So we design these bundles, these bundled plans, essentially what we call them, for the type of user. And those bundled plans are essentially a convenient way to get them to subscribe to more features and save some money. Mm-hmm. But we also have these what we call a la carte features that they can purchase so that we can easily meet their needs. Because you'll get people who say, well, I don't want everything that's in the personal plan. I only want one or two things. So instead of paying $50 a month, they want to pay $15 a month, and that meets their needs. And so as a business, we generally try to be amicable to that. Not to say that it doesn't add some consternation and confusion to people when they're trying to purchase. Like, I don't know what plan I need. I don't know what features I need. And we work through that with them. But we're really trying to be amicable to people. Say, well, if you only need these features, then you only pay for those features. But if you're going to buy several features, then it might be just economical and easier for you to buy one of the bundled plans.
Yeah.
So it's more of a theory about how we work with customers and meet their needs.
Yeah, but my follow-up question was going to be, is there some confusion in the sign-up process, and is there ever any pressure, like internal pressure, to say, okay, let's just roll all these add-ons into the business tier and just leave it at that so that it's very clear what you're getting?
Well, there is. I mean, we've had those discussions, and we will have those discussions again. And this is a matter of learning. Our pricing structure is not complete. It's not done. We found that we're learning what problems it creates, but we also know that from our experience of Event Espresso 3, where we bundled everything in together at the same time, that created other problems. You ship all the code that they need, you give them all the prices, and if you bundle it all together, then you don't know what drives value for people. Mm-hmm. You don't know what they're willing to pay for. Right. But when you keep it separate, you see, people are subscribing to Stripe, people are subscribing to custom tickets, people are subscribing to the mobile apps, and you begin to understand as your business, well, what is driving subscriptions, what's driving value?
Yeah.
But when you throw it all together, it may simplify the process, but it also makes your business decision and what you learn about your business cloudy. So at this point, we're at that point where we're still trying to understand exactly what people need. And then we will change prices in the future, I'm sure, the packages. I would like to. Personally, it kind of frustrates me. But I understand from a business owner that it's more valuable for me to understand what drives value from our business than it is to just simplify the purchase process. And that's my perspective.
Yep.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. This has been absolutely amazing. Like I said before we started recording, normally we keep these to about half an hour, but it's been a pleasure getting you talking and letting you talk, because it's been extremely valuable. We usually like to end with, I guess, one last question. And what do you see for the future? Are there any big changes on the horizon? And what are you seeing? Maybe even in the larger context of WordPress and SaaS?
For me, I just think this year is going to be kind of a pivotal year for WordPress in general. I think the change of direction that Matt is giving and stepping in the project lead role again, and kind of switching up the whole release process is really going to. It's going to be one of those defining years in the sense it's either going to work or it's not going to work, kind of thing. And we're not going to know until it's all said and done. So that's interesting. On the side of EventSmart and Event Espresso, the big changes that we're anticipating this year are some, we're kind of focusing more on our core product, which is going to impact our SaaS platform as well. But we're really working hard on improving our user interface a bit more, incorporating JavaScript a bit more. So I'm, working with a little bit with Vue Vue.js, and we're building a framework using that. So it's kind of exciting. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff that probably won't see the light of day for a while yet, but we're looking forward to some great changes.
Nice.
Yeah. I don't have much to add other than, Rome wasn't built in a day, it came down in a day, but we're trying to build some really great things. And it takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, the people in the WordPress community that you look up to, they're not overnight successes. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of effort. And it just takes a lot of determination to try to stick it out. So in some ways, I hope things don't change because, we'll probably be more concerned than it would be, excited about it.
Sure. Well, and the famous saying in the music industry goes, it took 10 years to become an overnight sensation. So it's this is why in part I wanted to have these behind the scenes conversations, because a lot of the time we don't recognize, the long, slow climb that it takes to blow up overnight, quote unquote.
Yeah, and if I was to refer you to one document that I think is helpful for SaaS owners, it's called the slow death ramp of SaaS.
Ramp of. Oh, now I can't say it. But yeah, the woman from Constant Contact.
Yeah, if you haven't watched her presentation, it's kind of a must because it'll give you somewhat of an expectation about how things go. And theirs is different in the sense that they were venture funded. If you're going with WordPress and SaaS, you're probably going to be bootstrapped. So, multiply the ramp out by, another 10 years. But right. That's what I would refer you to give you an expectation and what it's like to operate a SaaS platform.
Very good. Well, on that note, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to find you, where should they find you? Are you on Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm at Nered, my first name backwards.
And I'm at Garth Koyle, just my first and last name.
Awesome.
And everybody should check out both Event Espresso as a WordPress plugin and then eventsmart.com for all of your event ticketing needs. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That was another episode of The Matt Report. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of it. It means a lot when somebody actually learns something from the conversations that I have here, either personal gains or business gains, whatever it might be, just learning your way in the crazy world of WordPress. That's why I do it. I couldn't do it without my audience. I couldn't do it without my sponsors as well. So please go ahead and thank the sponsors. Use the services that I've mentioned in these episodes. I really vet them and make sure that they're only putting out good products with great support, and they really care about the WordPress community. That's why I've chosen them. So it means a lot if you go ahead on Twitter and tell them that you heard them on the Matt Report podcast. As always, mattreport.com/subscribe to join the mailing list. It's the number one way to stay connected. I send private videos there to my newsletter. It's really becoming much more than just a boring old newsletter, so I hope I can see you over there. And the best thing that you can do for the show is head on over to iTunes, search for WordPress Podcast, leave me a 5-star review if you enjoy the episode. I'd really appreciate it. We'll see you in the next episode.